Welcome back, Warrior Family.
We're here to talk about anxiety.
Ooh, nice. That was a new one.
It was new. It was right off the cuff. I was like, as I heard you sing, I was like, oh no, I don't remember my last song line that I felt
Which
good
was also
about.
good.
So it was a moment of panic, and then I just kind of, went with the flow.
You nailed it. Absolutely
Thank
nailed
you.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Warriors, we have got a juicy topic for you today.
Oh yeah, super juicy.
Is it juicy? I don't know.
It's not juicy.
That word came out of nowhere.
I
Speaking of off the
know.
cuff, speaking of flow, it felt
Oh,
right though.
I'm sorry I shut it down. It's so super juicy. Yes. Yes. Not only is it juicy, and it is.
Don't you label how it is.
Ooh. It is neutral.
It's
I
a
feel like
neutral topic.
how do I not label? How do I not label it after the and now?
I
It
don't
is what
know.
it is. And it is what it is.
It is what it is. We're labeling it that it is what it is.
Yes.
Okay, Warriors, this Hot Mess Express is going to be talking about labels today.
Wow.
Ooh,
Juicy.
so juicy. Can't you just feel the juices flowing?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with how we even define the word label.
Yeah.
Like when you hear the word label, what is like your gut trigger? Like what is the words that you would use to define it?
See, here's the problem. I knew what you meant, but then when you said when you hear the word label, I instantly thought of like labels on food, right? And so like I
Which are
know,
valuable.
yeah, exactly. So I think that my gut is a mixed bag of labels are helpful, but labels are also limiting.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
How about you?
Yeah, I think I agree with that completely. I mean, because like even though I made the joke about food, it is it's like it's a useful thing to know
Mhm.
what something is objectively, right? If you're looking at like a jar of jam, it's like, okay, that's a jar of jam.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's see. I don't know how much jam that is. Okay, let's read the how many ounces it is. What goes in the jam, right? Like there's a million things that we can gain from looking at a label, from labeling our experience, from labeling just thoughts and feelings, right? Like you and I talk
Mm-hmm.
so much about name it to tame it. And so like for me, labeling how I feel, for example, I'll just use that, feels supportive. It feels great. It feels helpful. It feels like I have information. I am
Yes.
practicing awareness, right?
Yes.
But then sometimes if labels are thrown at me, even if they're thrown at me gently, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't love being labeled as a shy person. And
Mm.
randomly, mostly it's like people used to say, like, oh, Margot, when I remember when you were little, you were so shy. And I become kind of triggered by hearing that because I feel like the real label was that I had social anxiety, was that I had
Mm.
trust issues, was that I didn't want to talk to people, right? And it had
Mhm.
less to do with like, oh, that human being is just shy.
Right.
Then it feels like you're
Limiting.
not right. Exactly.
It's limiting the
Exactly.
experience. Yeah.
Right. And almost like not, I don't want to say dismissive because I don't think it's intended that way,
Right.
but it can be viewed as just like, oh, she's just shy, right?
Right.
Like using that same example. So I guess this is the long version of me saying exactly what you said, which is
Yeah.
that it's useful and it's limiting.
Yeah. No, I liked the detail though. And because it's so true. Like for me, like I was thinking about like when people like first meet me, right? Like in our society, like one of the next questions after meeting someone is usually like, what do you do? Right.
Yeah.
And or like, what's your profession or what's your job? And I have always cringed away from those labels because I don't feel like responding by the work that I do fully encapsulates me as a human being. And I don't want to box myself in. Like when I say yoga, depending on who I speak to, they're going to have a different idea of what that means. And do I really want to explain what yoga means to me and how I define it and how that is my job? Right? No, I don't, unless they want to talk about that. Right. So for me, I feel like it's just super cringe when meeting new people and they instantly want to label me so they know how to converse with me in a sense. Usually, the labels help, like in conversation, like, like, what do you do? Oh, me too. Like, if I like said accounting or something, right? Like,
yeah, right.
not a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I'm a kids yoga teacher too. Once in a while, sure. But so that's where like the limiting piece really comes for me. But I appreciate how you said in the emotional experience too, especially as a kid, like people put that label on you probably in part for them to feel comfortable. Right.
Yeah.
Because like if you're not interacting with them, it's easy for people to take offense to that. Like, why doesn't this kid like me? Oh, they're just shy. As opposed to like, oh, there's this whole world going on underneath them with a blend of stuff, and it's not really shyness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, I want to go back to something you just said about when you feel sort of maybe caged by someone's question being about work.
Yeah.
So like, I know in our small talk episode, you had talked a lot about like skipping the sort of like, what do you do, and going straight to like, what makes you smile, right?
Yeah.
And I do think, I mean, there's so much merit and value to that because you're acknowledging that there's a human being that exists without what they do for a living, and that we have value inherently and we have worth inherently just from existing as who we are in the world. And so there's that, right? And I think it's so important and so valuable. But I'm curious if you can just speak more to why do you think it is? If you had to take a layer off here, what do you think it is that makes it cringe for you about people asking? Because I feel like cringe is a really specific emotion. It's like, I always think of the disgust character from Inside Out, the Pixar movie. And so like, when I hear cringe, that's a visceral feeling. That's like a gut, like black kind of feeling. And so like, is it that you just don't want the person asking you to know about you? Like, I don't know. I want to hear more about why you think it's cringe.
Yeah. So I don't know if I've ever really, really thought about it, except for that I don't like defining myself based on my work, right? Like I can try to peel away some layers right now. Like so these are the thoughts that were coming up as you asked this question. There is so much more to our lives than just our work, right? There's our financial life, right? But when you're first meeting someone, do they ask you about your finances to define you? No, right? There is your maybe spiritual life. Do they ask about that right away? Hey, so what's your spirituality or what's your religion?
Right. No. These are like really taboo topics.
Right. There's our emotional life. First question, maybe they're like, how are you? But we know they're not really asking that. So we say, okay, right? Sure. They're not like, what's your emotional experience right now? How do you navigate challenging emotions, right? Like they're not asking that piece about us, right? Yeah. There's our relationship life, which is a little less taboo, but still like someone that just got out of a long-term relationship doesn't want someone to ask them if they're in a relationship or not. Sure. When people are dating and they don't have plans for marriage, they don't like when people ask, when are you getting married? Right? When people are married and they don't have kids, right? They don't necessarily like those questions. And so although it is more common, it is still, some people are getting hip to the idea that those are not questions you ask people right away.
Right. They feel more personal, right? As opposed to work maybe feeling like a lot of people might just feel like it's more benign, like it's more mundane or something.
Right. But why is it more mundane than finances, than emotions, than relationships, than our sensuality, than our sexuality?
Because it's less personal, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you think that it's less personal what you do for work than all the other things that you said that were kind of taboo?
I mean, I think because it's so normalized, it's less personal. But I think that it's because in life, people really just view their lives as their life and their work life, and not all of these other areas in their life. Yeah. Right. And so it's less taboo because like 50% is your life, 50% is your work life, as opposed to like, there's 10% for emotions, 10% for relationships, 10% for your body and your health, right? 10% for your mental health, right? Like as opposed to the whole of it, right? There's just these little pieces. So I think that's like part of it. And in that, like, I've always been proud of my work, but also it's not just like saying accounting. So usually the moment I start talking about kids yoga, more questions come up, especially because a lot more assumptions come up, right?
That's true.
And so I need to like over explain that. And then I get like labeled and put into a category of, you know, yoga, kids yoga. This is what a yogi is like. That, you know, this is what I can expect from this person.
So do you think it's like the people's perception of you then? Right? Like you don't want to be put into a box of how people perceive you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And even for me, like I used to love the label kids yoga and mindfulness teacher, and also like kids yoga and mindfulness like teacher trainer and doing the trainings. And there was so much like joy and pride in my job. But then when things changed, I feel like there was a lot more grieving the identity of that person because of the label and the feelings attached to that label.
Yeah.
Right. And so I feel like the labels also really limit me. Oh, she's a teacher. Right. Oh, she's and so if I want to break free from that, then it's like a lot more work than if just I'm Abby, which is still a label, but there's more to that then.
Right. And I think it's just easier for folks too. It's like, okay, they have a level of understanding about who you are as a person based on what you do. But it goes back to what I said earlier, which is just like, we're obviously way more than what we do. We're whole layered human beings. But I think that if somebody were to meet you and say, you know, Abby, tell me about yourself or whatever, without saying anything about work, right? Is that sort of like a better question?
Oh my God, yes.
Right. It's just more open and like,
I can choose the labels.
Right. Yeah.
I can choose it then. It's not like, okay, I need you to define yourself in your work life, as opposed to tell me about yourself. Well, you know what? I love reading. Right.
Yeah.
Like now you can label me as a, you know, reader or book lover, or like label me as whatever that is. Right. I love volunteering at the Denver Zoo. Right. And then you can label me in that way. So, you know, and then it gives me permission to decide moving forward, you know, and this thought is just coming up. So I remember this story, where a friend of, you know, ours actually, lost both of her dogs within a short amount of time. And she was going to I don't know, this like networking event or work event or whatever. And she realized she had to lose one of her labels. And it wasn't until that moment, because someone was like, tell me about yourself or whatever. And she would always have this introduction, you know, I'm a this, I'm a this, I'm a dog mom, I'm a this, I'm a that. And then she was like, but what am I now that I can't use that label? Right. And so part of the, like, that always stuck with me. This was like years ago. And that always stuck with me because we use these labels, but the more we say it, then the like harder it is to let go of and step into like a new version of ourselves. Because like, no, I'm this, not that. Or the other people think I'm this, not that.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I love that everything you're sharing is representative of being open to that flow change, right? Because it's like you said, I used to love the label of kids yoga and mindfulness teacher or trainer or both. And then when some of that shifted, you know, there was a lot around that. There was some trauma. There was some, you know, a little bit of heaviness. And so it makes sense that maybe that question feels different for you now, right? And you're like, okay, well, I can't say that whole like easygoing sentence that I used to just let flow out of my mouth because it was you for so long. And so there's just a level of openness to being like, hey, maybe I never needed to define myself as that anyway. Right.
Right. Well, even, I mean, as you're saying that, you're making me think of something else. And that is like, how about stay-at-home moms who or stay-at-home dads even, who give up their jobs to provide for their child, their newborn, their however old kid, right? And I've had so many friends that became stay-at-home moms and they hated that question. What do you do? Because some things are just not respected in society either. Right?
Exactly.
Like stay-at-home mom, unless you're like living it or have an idea of what it's like for real, like that is so much harder. I would rather go to a job than be a stay-at-home mom, right?
Like a million times, yes.
Yeah, it is so hard. And then the response is like, especially if someone's never been a stay-at-home mom, they're like, oh, cool. Right? So
there's no follow-up questions for them, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is so sad because as you said, it is the hardest job ever. Ever.
Yeah.
And the most complicated and interesting and rewarded. Like there's a million layers to being a stay-at-home mom, to being a mom at all, right? To being any of us. And so, yeah, it's interesting because I feel like labels and baskets keep us so controlled and safe in some ways. And safe and controlled aren't always good experiences.
Right.
Right.
You know, I like that controlled word that you use too. It does. Yeah. A label kind of controls how we behave.
Exactly. Right? And it informs how I might treat a person or people. Right? Yes. Exactly.
Right.
For good or bad, for helpful or not. Right.
You have maybe held to a higher standard than if you're a congressperson in how you treat people.
Yeah. It's like, I remember all of the things that I had to do to continue to be a classroom teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Work and money and time and effort gets poured into every year, more PDs, more training, more whatever. And yet someone could just go learn to be, Joe Schmo, whatever, and keep that job forever and never be questioned ever again. And they're like, it's just so interesting. I'm like, look, I'm not complaining about all that. No. I believe that teaching and medical, there are certain fields where you need to keep learning. You need to keep on top of your game. Things change. But the same should be true for every line of work then. Or not every maybe, but many other lines of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, okay. I mean, I feel like what I want to say too is I have a little bit of a different experience. Right. I agree with everything you said. I truly understand it. I think and I do feel that way mostly, right? Like everything you said, it's like, yeah, okay, yes, I feel that. That makes sense to me. And it all does. But at the same time, I guess I just always don't think that hard. It's situation dependent. Let's just say that. But overall, if I had to put it in like a totality sense, I feel like I don't care that much about how I'm being perceived, no matter who I'm talking to. Right. So like, there are exceptions, right? Like if I'm trying to get a job or,
right.
Like there are certain, or I guess if I really care about a person and I want them to like me, or like I'm worried, which doesn't happen that often, right? But I've been in many circumstances over the course of my adulthood and probably my childhood too, though I don't really remember, where I was like, oh, I want to make a good impression. Oh, I hope they like me. Oh, well, I want them to friend me on Instagram after this and think I'm cool. Like, and so that like high school energy will come out in me a little bit. And it's not that it's high school. I guess I just feel like overall, my mind just never goes to how am I being perceived by this person? Am I going to be lumped into a category in their mind? Even if they lump me, I just don't care. I guess is what I'm saying. So like, it's not never, but it's very infrequent when I feel like concerned about how I'm being perceived in any way where I would even question their question to me. It's just, I don't know, but like you've made me think differently about it, not to the point where I'm going to worry or have a complex and be like, I'm going to change the way I answer questions or whatever. I guess I hear the question, what do you do? I answer it and we move on. Like I just don't know. My brain just never thinks about it.
Like, it's so funny because like I don't think that I care how they perceive me. I think that I care in how I label myself to this new person. And I know that like, I know, but I don't really care. I don't really care what they think about me in the things I say. But when someone asks me questions that have me label myself or define myself, I get uncomfortable with that. Like I get overwhelmed with those answers because there's so many things I want to say. And it's like, how do I choose to label myself in this one word thing? Yeah.
That's
As I was
interesting.
listening
So
to
it's
you, I
about
was like, I totally agree with you. Like these conversations with these, random ass people, I don't
randoms. Yeah.
care. But it's more, I care about what I say. And
Interesting.
that's
Okay,
the part that
that definitely
causes
is
me
different.
discomfort.
So like when I had said and I asked you before about perception, that's what I meant. Like, is it worry about being perceived in a certain way? And then, so
Okay.
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. It all makes sense. It's not that
Yeah.
I do understand.
Yeah.
I just have I thought so much less about labels, period, when it came to conversations with people. I'm glad that you just brought up like labeling ourselves because
Yes.
I think we both feel like it's okay. I feel, I'll just speak for me. I feel okay with labeling myself. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like an opportunity for self reflection. It feels like power and empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like, having more information, whether it be from some kind of test or just my own research or just thinking about it. How
Mm-hmm.
do I feel about this part of me? Right? I'm noticing a pattern with X. What might that be? Let me sit on that for a while. Right? Let me
Mm-hmm.
meditate on that shit. Let me journal on like whatever it is. Maybe I read about it. Maybe I don't. But like giving myself labels, like being an anxiety warrior, that label feels really good to me
Mm-hmm.
because I find it empowering, right?
Yeah.
It feels right.
Yeah.
We've had people tell us they don't like that phrase or it triggers them. And like, fair enough, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe you don't like being in the basket of someone that deals with anxiety, or whatever. And I just feel like, so when it comes to labeling me, I feel good about it. It feels right to me,
Ah.
and I don't feel like I'm putting myself in a box because I'm also okay with the label changing. I'm not
Right.
saying that it's going to be really comfortable in the immediate,
Yeah.
right? So like if a label is to change, like, when you talked about that person that we know that lost her dogs and her label changed, like that's me now, right?
Right.
And so like I'm okay with it, even though it sucks and it's painful.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
And so I'm in the mindset of being in the flow state when it comes to changing the label because it is my current reality. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying it's the reality that I prefer. I want my dog back like
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
But that's not the reality, right? And so I don't know. I guess I'm less I just I don't find it to be a struggle for me to
Hmm.
label myself like at all.
Right.
What about you?
Uh, when I'm just with me,
Yeah.
I think I'm fine. I think it's again just with other people. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's so much more to me than the labels I can describe myself as. Right? Like
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know where it can like I remember one time I was with a friend in the city. This was like 2010. And we were just going around. I think we went to a bar. I can't even like remember, but we were in the city and we were hanging out and we were going places. And we met these random people outside and they were like, the first thing they were like is, what do you do? And I think at the time I was like a nanny, right? Like I think that everything, this might have been like 2012, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. But I just remember like not wanting to say that, like, because there's more to me than being a nanny. And so I was like, well, are you asking about my job? Or are you asking about the things I enjoy doing in life? Right. And in that moment, me asking that back felt so empowering because then I got to decide how I wanted to find myself versus just being limited to the work piece.
So
Right.
interesting.
Yeah. And so in regards to like, I mean, I have to label myself when I'm like writing introductions about who I am or like who I am on like on my website, like all those things I
Right.
have to write my labels. So overall, I'm okay with it. But I think that when I'm first meeting people, I think I want to be in charge of how I define and label myself versus having to respond to the question that is almost the follow-up question after the name is what do you do?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe that goes back to small talk and social anxiety, right?
Probably. Yeah, I would think so to some extent. I feel like just thinking about that example, like if someone were to now you said you were that maybe your thought was to respond with a question. That makes sense to me. If
Mm-hmm.
I met a person and I asked them, "What do you do?" Because I have asked that question to people. Usually it's because I don't really care to know much else about them. There's and because I do feel like it's a little bit more benign it's easier, even though everything you said before is valid and makes me, think about it, right? Which is important. It's like maybe that person doesn't want to share that they're a stay-at-home mom or nanny. And some of that just has to go with the way that our society values certain jobs over others.
Right.
And so I don't want to put words in your mouth. Maybe, there's nothing wrong. There's literally nothing wrong with being a nanny, but like there may have been some like anxiety around just being labeled as someone that watches people's kids because for whatever reason, our society looks down upon that. And it's not quote unquote enough and whatever fucking bullshit. But what I want to say about that is that like, I feel like if somebody were to answer my question, what do you do? And they were to be like, well, I crochet and I, go surfing on the weekends with my family. And they just started saying a bunch of shit they like to do. I'd be like, are you fucking kidding me? And I'll admit that like, okay, that's something I need to think about and check. At the same time, I find people that do that fucking annoying. That's not what I asked you. Right. So like if you don't want to be labeled by what you do, then like you said, ask the question differently. Yeah. What are you asking me? I liked the flow of your question. Are you asking about what I do as my trade or my occupation, or are you asking about me as a person? Yeah. I love that, because to me, then it's like it's going to make me as the asker question, what do I mean? Right? Because it is a knee-jerk reaction kind of question. But I'll just speak for me when I say, don't answer what do you do with what you like to do in your free time, because I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit what you do.
I didn't ask you your hobbies.
That's the difference between you and me too. Like when you ask people what makes them smile, I don't give a shit what makes you smile. Unless you're my friend or we're trying to connect on a deep level. Yeah. I don't care what makes you smile. Because at the end of the day, if I'm asking you what you do for a living, it means we're at some kind of bullshit event and I don't really want to know you.
Yeah.
Now, so if I want to know what makes you smile, I'll ask you that. But if I don't ask you that, don't give me that.
What would be after the what do you do? What would be the next question you would ask after?
I have no idea. I guess it would depend on what they said. Really don't know, because that's changed every time. I've asked that question and it depends on the answer. Sometimes if I have experience with their job or I know someone that does it, we talk about that. Sometimes the job is very uninteresting and so we move on. And so when I say uninteresting, meaning like you've mentioned accountant a couple of times, right? Like,
it's okay, let's bash
no offense to any accountants that might be listening.
Zaina would bash it too, and Zaina is an
people
accountant.
in my family are accountant. It's fine. It's a wonderful job. Good for you. But like, I have no follow-up questions for you, right? It's like, it's very different from kids yoga. People are like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so, I'm like, oh, cool. Maybe I say, do you enjoy it? Probably not, though. I'm not even going to go there. We're just going to move on, right? I'm just going to ask something else. I have no idea. It's been a long time since I've had to deal with this situation that wasn't in a direct like networking kind of event where the point is that we're talking about work.
Right. That's different. So, when the point is a networking event for work, then yes, define your work and have work be the topic of conversation. Yeah. As you were saying this, like I just thought of, I recently met two strangers off of the internet. Like for real, like we haven't talked about this. And I won't get into all of the story now, but it was these two girls that I met through Instagram. Like we're a community that lives around Denver. Don't worry, Mom, I was super safe. And we just met at this like coffee shop place, and it was our first time ever meeting. And the funny thing is later on, Dan showed up too, and we all hung out, and Dan and I left, and Dan was like, so what did they do? And I was like, I don't know. We hung out for like at least 2 hours, and not once did any of us speak about work. And then later on, I looked them up, and then I they have like really cool jobs that would have been fun to talk about, but
missed opportunity.
But it was really, as I'm listening to you say, like, no, that's like, I usually ask that, right? It was like striking to me that I just had an encounter with 3 people where like none of us really ask that of each other, because I walked away not knowing what they did.
I love it. That's great. Yeah. Amazing. You found people for you.
But I did. Maybe we'll see. It was a first date. Okay. It's first date. Right. But I do agree with you in that one, labeling is also just neutral, right? Like it's just what it is, right? But also labeling is sometimes helpful, Right. And so even
Mm-hmm.
though I've just had this whole thing about me having discomfort labeling myself when people ask me questions about me, I feel more comfort, compassion, and empathy when I label other people. Right.
Sure.
Like when someone has anxiety and their behaviors are maybe a little like you would think like, oh, these behaviors are off, and then I'm like, oh, this is their anxiety, then I have a lot more empathy than thinking they're an asshole. Right. When people do like ridiculous behaviors rather than judging them as an asshole, like I give the label of, oh, this looks like this personality disorder. Now I have more empathy and compassion for them.
So even if you don't know the label, you give them a label.
I mean, I'm not like you have a personality disorder and you have a personality disorder, but I think about the behavior and I see
Mm.
if there's a label that can match that. Right. If I'm like first meeting someone and they're super inattentive, like I can be like, wow, they're fucking rude. Or I could be like, oh, I wonder if they have ADHD. I can understand this.
Right. So it's more of a curiosity and not like, oh, they're X, like,
Right.
oh, they're Y. It's more like, I wonder if, because
Yeah.
that changes everything in my mind when you say that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or
It's
if
like,
I know them for a period of time and their behaviors are repetitive, then I'm like, oh, this matches with this.
they're
This
probably
is
just an asshole then.
yeah, they're probably someone I need to set some boundaries and block.
Oh yeah.
But what about
Um,
you labeling others?
I um I struggle with that one a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quicker to label how I feel about someone's behavior or their reactivity or response or whatever as a feeling of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
That made me feel X. How that person behaved made me angry. What they said hurt my feelings. Or I saw that so and so, body language changed when that person said that to them. Like I'm sort of noticing I guess my go-to is just take in the awareness of all of that, my
Mm-hmm.
own feelings and sensations, and what I can sort of gauge as far as like context clues about what's happening with other people in the space. Should there be other people in the space? Um, but then I feel like I do something similar to what you're saying, which is just like it's a curiosity. It's I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if, right? It's not like they must be X or probably blah, I guess I don't, my brain would be quicker to go to judging them as an asshole than someone that has X. But
Mm-hmm.
as you said, if I know them for a while, if I know them longer, I'm giving them more leeway.
Yeah.
I'm more curious. If
Yeah.
you're a person on the street who suddenly starts yelling at me for no reason, like again, this isn't a real example. I'm doing a poor job of creating an example for example's sake, but like
Yeah.
if I am sitting in the diner and I ask the waiter for some more ketchup and he says, I'll be there in a minute, right? And like gives me an attitude or whatever, I'm immediately going to be like, what the fuck, right? Fuck
Mm-hmm.
you. You're a dick. I want to talk to your manager, right? Like my brain goes immediately to like firing at all cylinders.
Yeah.
But like after I've had a moment with like, okay, that's a lot of big feelings I'm having. I didn't like that behavior. Then if I may come to the conclusion of like, oh, maybe that person's just having a shitty day, right? Like I try to give them the benefit of the doubt, unless
Mm-hmm.
it's a pattern, right? Which isn't going to be from my waiter necessarily, unless I go there all the time. But
Right.
like, so like I'm more likely to give leeway if I know you and we know and you know me or whatever. And I feel safe enough to ask you what's going on or to
Mm-hmm.
share an observation with that person. Hey, that didn't really seem like you. Like, what's up? Are you okay? But if it's a total stranger, right, then it's more about like trying to check my impulsivity of reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I'm able to catch myself, then I can dip into the curiosity and the compassion. But
Mm-hmm.
it all comes back to like how I experience a person or a situation,
Yeah.
right? Because like if something happens and I'm super triggered, it may take me longer
Right.
to try to analyze the situation and what that person might be dealing with or going through.
Yeah.
And so like I struggle with just like slapping labels, but at the same time I try to be as curious as possible. Like in the wondering once
Yes.
I'm past the reactivity.
Right. And I like how you said, like, you label yourself first.
Yes.
You name how you're feeling
Yeah.
before moving forward. And usually, I don't know. I, I don't know where you usually came from because I feel like I don't even pay attention that much to like what my go to is. But I think often before I label my feelings, I'm trying to be curious about like what the fuck just happened, right? Like, and then later on, I'm like, oh yeah, I was feeling this or whatever, you know. So it's just interesting how our labeling is like opposite,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For me, labeling others gives me more comfort, and for me, labeling others gives me more comfort. For me, labeling me gives me more discomfort.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cool. I love this conversation. I really do, because I feel like it's like, okay, this is going to sound cliche, but it's like labels get thrown around a lot, and they do. But I feel like I haven't heard a lot of conversation about labels and
Yeah.
how we, or at least the two of us and
Receive them.
warriors, you can think about it, right? How do you receive labels? What do they feel like to you? I'm reading this, or I should say I'm rereading, because I had read it once before, the book Lighter by Young Pueblo.
Mm-hmm.
And I just refinished, because when I read it the first time, I feel like I moved really quickly through it. And so, but I loved it. I love him. I love his Instagram page. That's how I found him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm reading it now at a much slower pace, and I'm really going through the journaling prompts at the end of each chapter. Whereas before I kind of just skipped the journaling prompts and just kept reading.
Yeah.
Because I'm
You're
like, I'm
like,
not
give
gonna
it to
stop
me.
reading. Yeah. I'm
Give me
like, I
this
need to read
wisdom.
this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to, but like I'm sort of forcing myself to pause, which is actually, of course, been very therapeutic and very cool. But there was this quote that I'm going to read that was about labels that I thought would be just apropos for the topic. And he says, the ego loves labels, not only for the sake of understanding, but also to acquire more kindling for the fire of attachment. Labels
Wow.
function, right?
Oh my
Lab-
God. I feel seen. Oh my God. Okay. Right. I said it. Labels make you more attached, right? I said that. Did I? I know
I
I
don't,
said it.
I don't know.
Like
I don't,
we are attached to that identity.
okay.
When we
Yes.
label ourselves, when we're attached. I said,
Yes. Yes.
okay. I am
Okay.
wise like young Pueblo.
Yeah. Young Pueblo.
Okay.
Okay. Can I finish the quote?
Yes. And you can even start from the beginning now and I'll
Okay.
soak it all up. But I just,
Okay. I'll read it. I'll start over because
yeah.
it works as a whole. Here we go. The ego loves labels, not only for the sake of understanding, but also to acquire more kindling for the fire of attachment. Labels function as brakes that help us to counteract the natural flow of change. And sometimes they even serve as a form of resistance to doing healing work.
Ah, I feel like he took all my insides
You
and
got to
then
read this book.
made it in a very simple, understandable way.
Everything he writes is like that. Everything he writes is
I
like
mean,
that. It's like mind blow every time.
I've seen his Instagram page, but I just like in this moment with us talking about like that's what we should do. We should have a topic and then find a quote that goes with it and read it after. But one of us doesn't know what the quote is, right? Like, because I feel like that was everything I was saying, but he simplified it and hit it to the point. And like, I just, I very much,
Right?
yeah. Well
Yeah.
done, you and him.
Yes. And everyone should go read Lighter by Young Pueblo. It's great. Um, so yeah, okay, warriors. We would love to know how you feel about this.
Mm-hmm.
Take some time today, this week, to reflect on it. What are the experiences that you've had in your life with being labeled, with labeling others? How does it feel when you feel like you've been maybe placed in a basket of being one type of person or another? Do you often associate labels with your job or your relationship status or any of those sort of baskets that we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
right? That don't necessarily make up our worth. Well, they definitely don't make up our worth, but that don't necessarily make up who we are in our totality,
Yeah.
right? In our like person. Um, and so just maybe journal on it, maybe sit with it, maybe, meditate on it, whatever you do, take these thoughts for a walk and think about it. How do
Mm-hmm.
labels affect you in your day to day? Or maybe people around you. What have you noticed about people around you and their labels? Maybe your kids your students have labels that you feel like are helpful to you in helping serve them or be better parents to them or whatever. Maybe those labels are, you know, make you feel a certain way, right? And it may not feel comfortable. And so can you take some time to consider your relationship to labels? Are you able to be in a flow state? Do you care about how you're perceived by other people? There's so many things we talked about. I'm like, I can't even sum them up right now.
Yep.
So warriors, just take some time whenever you want, if you want, to consider your relationship to labels. All right. Abby, do you have a win of the week? Win of the week.
I do. I feel like I have a few, but I'm only going to do one this time. And that is that on Saturday, which doesn't matter because this is going to come out way more weeks after, the Denver Zoo had their annual fundraiser called Flock Party. And so Dan and I went, and in Flock Party, like there was like just so many things. There was a lot of education. We got to watch the painted dogs get fed, which was like really exciting. And like the painted dogs knew that they were going to get fed, right? Because the keepers came out with these like frozen venison and blood cups. And the painted dogs got so excited. They're running around like yipping at each other and like playing, and they're like so excited for these cups of food, of fun. Learn more about painted dogs. Guess what? The number one like killer of painted dogs, aside from losing habitat, is disease. So they're trying to vaccinate like domesticated, like loose but domesticated dogs in the area, so they stop spreading disease to painted dogs, because painted dogs are pretty endangered. Anyway, that's not my win. My win is, along with going to the zoo and having this really fun experience at Flock Party, they also have a silent auction, which, let me tell you, is super anxiety producing, right? Because like, you don't want to bid on everything and then have to pay $1 million that you don't have. Right?
I always think of Joey Tribbiani on Friends. I want the Mr. Beaumont. Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But you also don't want to limit yourself to one thing, because you don't know what anyone's highest bid is.
You might not win, right?
Right. So Tilly, the painted dog, right? And she is actually over the age of the average lifespan of a painted dog. She's older, right? I forget how old, 15, 16. I forget how old Tilly is, but Tilly is the mom of the painted dogs. She had 3 paintings. So they had the animals like make art, right? Sometimes it was footprints. Sometimes like they just like slashed on the paper a bit with some paint, right? Sometimes it was a nose print. And Tilly, the painted dog, had made 3 pieces of art, and Dan and I were bidding on them, and we kept getting outbid, right? So I did not win a piece of art by Tilly, the painted dog.
Boo.
But I did win a beautiful piece of art by Billy, the Asian elephant.
Billy and Tilly,
right? It was kind of meant to be.
It was meant to be, yeah.
And it is beautiful, and it is pink, and it is yellow, and I love the Asian elephants. They are the largest male bachelor herd like in the United States, and they are incredibly beautiful and amazing. And I love Billy, and I love all of the other Asian elephants. But so we still won something, and that felt like a huge win, and it was a super fun night.
Yay. Oh my God, you guys look so cute. Everyone scroll back to Abby's Instagram and find the Flock Party pics.
We're in pink, so that's, you didn't have to, but it was suggested to wear pink.
Yeah, you were a flock. You're part of the flock. Makes sense.
Right.
Makes sense. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Great win. Love it, love it, love it. Can't wait to see the Denver Zoo. There better not be any snow on the ground when I visit you next month.
Even if there is, it'll be okay.
I just hate snow so much. Anyway, moving on. We love you, warriors. Thank you for being here with us this week. If you'd like to connect with us for any reason, you can join our Instagram fam at Anxiety Warriors Podcast. Feel free to shoot us an email at anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com, where you can shout out your wins of the week, big or small. Share to any topic ideas that you have with us, things you'd love to hear us chat about on the pod, or if you think you would be an amazing guest on our show, we'd love to talk to you. So please reach out. Take 2 seconds and smash that 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're tuning in right now. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can please head on into our show notes, tap our Threadless shop link, and grab yourself something fun for fall.
Mm-hmm. It sounds nice. It's definitely getting a little chillier here. So
no, okay.
Get your warmer clothes. Thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. We are so grateful to get to do this with you all.
Till next time.